This is 1 million cups. If you've shown up to my chemistry class, you're in the wrong room. So I'm Eric, and I'll be your host today. And we've got a fantastic refill presentation from one of our fellow 1MC hosts, Katie. But before we get there, I hope that you have some kind of caffeinated beverage or any kind of beverage of your choice as we get ready to go. Don't forget, you can get information about us by going to our webpage or going to our social media. We'd love to have you join up and get weekly updates and know what's going on from us so that we can be in touch as often as possible. So, let's see if this is going to let me, there we go. What do we do with 1 million cups? Well, for me, 1 million cups is really about building a community and support. And we do that by sharing our ideas, offering help to each other, asking for help. In essence, being there without the pressure of trying to be business partners and other things. We do this by just helping and being casual and being inquisitive and asking and listening. That's what we do. And we're different than other kind of startup helpers or entrepreneurial groups because we're not wanting to see a pitch. We want to just hear what you're about, what's your story, and help you move that story towards what might become a pitch in the future. We're not out here networking so that we can have that super duper meeting where we might get the deal. No, we're here connecting. These connectors are going to help us. We're going to help them. We're going to become part of a community so that we're supporting each other and making this journey easier. And we're all a community. We're run by a community. We're just a bunch of volunteers doing what we can. But most importantly to me, I love that we're radically and intentionally inclusive. We are all about anybody who's trying to start a business, getting an opportunity to share that, giving them a platform to be and to experience what everyone should to help them grow. This happens across the nation, all over the United States, a whole bunch of places each day with lots of volunteers and a lot of people involved. And every week, the goal is to have some keywords pop through. We want to be about education. We want to be about presentations and those connections. So as you go through today, you will learn things. You will see a presentation and you'll make connections. It'll be fantastic. And if you engage with the speaker after she's done, you will be helping to educate her. It's going to be a fantastic big circle of goodness for us all. All right, so oftentimes we meet in a place like this, which is called the Collective. And since this has started, not just Seattle, but around the country, over 8,000 people have presented in just this same fashion that you're going to see Katie do today. It's an outstanding thing. Hopefully we'll be back in the Collective someday soon. It'd be fantastic, wouldn't it? Let's hope. To make this happen, we have a few sponsors that help us out. Seattle Strong, when we're in person, provides us with the coffee. A small studio helps us keep our meetup page going. And Human Up is giving us our active campaign, which is how we send our emails and keep track of who wants to hear from us and who doesn't want to hear from us. And of course, I mentioned that the Collective is also supporting us in person when we do meet in person. And there's a few of us that work each week trying to make this go as smoothly as possible. There's the team of 5 that we have, but we would love to have some more help if you would like to be involved. So feel free to ping us if you think you might want to help and be a volunteer with us. So here's what goes on for our particular 1MC version of the world. We have some coffee and conversation. That's what we've already had. Then we have an entrepreneur give a 6-minute presentation followed by about 20 minutes of question and answering. And there's going to be, after that, we're going to go into some breakout rooms so you can do some of that connecting one-on-one or one-on-two with a few other people and just get to a smaller group. To make this go and be very smooth, to make it just be a good educational and learning experience for everyone, be a supportive listener. Please limit what you have in terms of distraction. Think and consider what stands out during the presentation and ask questions about what you want to learn more about, what they should expound upon, and what else is in your area of expertise is something that you can share that might really give them a leg up and help accelerate their business growth. When we get done, we're going to come back to this after the presentation. But I think with that being said, I'm going to stop my share and allow Katie from the McLaughlin Method, give a refill presentation. We're super excited. Yay, Katie.
Woo! All righty. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I see a lot of familiar faces and several faces that I don't know. So my name is Katie McLaughlin, and I am the founder, chief strategist, and transformation artist at McLaughlin Method. And people are ultimately the ones that drive our business outcomes. And it's why you'll see companies investing more and more in their people. But there's a really clear problem that we're all trying to fix, whether it's the cost of turnover, the rate at which people are like leaving and leaving companies, but also the fact that even CEOs and CFOs realize that an unhealthy culture can lead to unethical behavior. And we're investing in culture, but we're still having, we know there's a problem, but we're all still stressed at work. We experience people yelling and verbal abuse really commonly at work. And job stress is one of the highest stresses that we experience today. So still a problem, and we know there's a problem. So, one way that companies are trying to solve this problem is in the startup and tech world, where they said, we're going to do something different, that we're going to focus on our people. We're going to make it a fun place to work. And, they're focused on the environment and what makes it a creative space. And you'll see companies have statements like this, where, it's about building a community. And then we also happen to have a great thing that we do. And it's very attractive. That is where I have spent the majority of my career, and just fell in love with startups and with that intention of creating something different, a workplace where we can use our skills and build community and give back and create something good. But in my time in the startup world, I found that, I was initially responsible for kind of selling that Kool-Aid about what it's like to work at these companies and how it will be different. And over time, I started to see that erode, where I realized that some of the same problems that I experienced in a more kind of formal corporate environment were still there. There was still infighting among team members. There was still backhanded compliments and passive aggressive communication, and sometimes outright toxic aggression. I know I experienced that, where I would go into a meeting with my direct manager and question, am I going to get yelled at today, or am I going to get heaps of praise because of this same thing? And it could have gone either way anytime. So even the startups are not figuring it out. This same company that had this on their website on the left had these tanking Glassdoor reviews. So the people are speaking out and really saying that things are not being done well enough. And, we're trying to fix this problem through leadership development, and we're spending a ton of money on it in the US alone. But our leadership development is also not good enough. We're not focusing on the key behaviors that are going to allow leaders to connect with each other, with their employees. People don't even know their employees' names sometimes. That one was a real shocker for me. But we're spending a lot of money. We're not focusing on the right behaviors, and employees are feeling it. They would work harder if they were better appreciated. And almost unanimously, in 1,000 people surveyed, 91% of them said that their leaders lacked communication skills. And almost at least half of us believe that leadership is either minimally or not at all improving company culture. So we still have to get at the heart of this problem. And so we need real actionable change, not just another training. So we have to first move beyond theory and policies into action. Many companies are trying to solve some of the problems like inclusion, diversity, harassment through policymaking and structures, but that's not going to help people create an inclusive culture. That's not going to help a leader to know how to inspire or motivate their teams. And so ultimately, we really need to redesign the day-to-day experience of culture within the workplace. And so what I bring into my programs is 15 years as a master facilitator and coach. I've worked with over 25 companies and helping them to craft leadership, learning and development programs, manage organizational change. And I've done this across all kinds of industries. And if it's a startup problem, I've experienced it, whether it's an acquisition or a merger, a new product, or switching markets. And ultimately, at the core of the work that I do and what has made a big difference for me is an application of human performance, human psychology, and behavior from my theater education. And so ultimately, our intentions and our emotions are what drives our actions and our words. And so we have to be looking inside at our intentions, at our emotions, and understand who we are first. So that way we can start to change how we act, move out of a habitual reaction into intentional action in order to change that behavior. So we need a place to practice, and we need to rehearse for real life situations. When studied across all the leadership development programs, only 31% are using role play. And part of that is that most of us hate role play. They're done poorly. We feel like we're put on the spot. And so we really need a different way to practice. And so that's where I bring theater into my work. And you can see just from looking at these images, an image can say a lot. You don't need to say much with words in order to communicate what, who these characters might be. So that is one of the core techniques that I bring into my workshops is image theater. So you can express yourself without knowing the right words to say. And, we can look at objective situations in the workplace with a new lens. By being able to step into someone else's emotion and experience, we can start to build empathy without even having to have someone explain it to us. And so we can get to a change faster. All of my work is team-based because ultimately we are pack animals. We are people who build community and need to know that our community is supporting us and is behind us. So by doing this work in a team, we're going to get the largest ripple effect. I focus first on executives because from the top is where the tone is set. So in my program, we focus on yourself. We diagnose today's challenges across the business and unpack your own individual assumptions and bias. So that way we can then upgrade our skills, get that practice, that rehearsal for reality, so we can then implement new habits and also implement a culture contribution plan. What does that day-to-day look like in a company? And so ultimately, I'm refocusing executives on how to lead with inclusion and engagement first. And that is McLaughlin Method.
Woo! There's my little happy celebratory. I love these reactions. Do you see my reaction? Yeah.
That was great. Thanks, Katie. I had lost my ability to unmute.
Oh.
And, I was like, where is everything on my screen? So that was fantastic. Thanks so much. What I'm going to do, though, is to make sure we know how to handle the goodness of, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share the Google if I can find it. I think it's this one. Nope, that's not. There it is. Can you guys see that? Yay. So fantastic. This is me using the multiple monitors for the first time, so I'm a little confused. You have an opportunity to raise your hand, and I'll see that and I'll call on you. You can raise your hand by hitting the little reactions button and then saying raise your hand. But if you got the old version of if you have an updated Zoom, I think that you have to go to where it says participants and then click on the raise your hand there. So find your raise your hand. If you raise your hand, I'll call on you and you'll get and your goal is to try to ask a real quick one question at a time. We don't want to see like, well, I've got another one. Let's get through everybody, then you can come back to you. So if we don't get all of your questions answered, please re-raise your hand afterwards. Other than that, Katie's, let's get going. And I'm going to turn this off because we don't need to see it anymore. I'm going to stop the share so we can see our lovely Katie. And according to me, the first person to raise their hand was Brian.
Hey, thank you. Amazing presentation, Katie. I'm a theater geek myself, and I'm in a similar space. And I guess one question I have for you, because I'm a survivor of a toxic workplace, and I can help the people in the toxic workplace, but ultimately we need to remove the toxic workplaces, and that's the leaders. When I did some of my market research, a lot of the leaders that I spoke to said toxic workplaces are a problem, but they're not here. And, you know, we're supposed to market to people's pain points, and if they're in denial of such pain points. So curious, in your deck, you talk about so many problems in the workplace. Are you finding people are like, hell yeah, that is a problem? Or are they still kind of thinking it's somewhere else? And how do you navigate that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I decided pretty early on that I was not in the business of convincing people that their people matter. And that I was in the business of helping them to show that and to take action. And so, you know, that's one reason why I specifically focus on startups, because most of them already think it's important. And ultimately, in order to work with the company, I need to have a certain amount of buy-in, right, from those executive leaders. And I feel like even if there's a kernel of awareness that something's not right, we're missing something, but we're not sure what it is, that's where I can come in and help. But that has of course been a challenge for me in figuring out, how do I approach some of these companies, like the company I showcased that had the great people language on their website and terrible Glassdoor reviews.
Yeah.
That's a company that like is right in my sweet spot, and I'm trying to figure out, like, how do I get in, right? So I'm like scouring my network. I've got some people who might know some people, but that's actually my core challenge right now, is figuring out how I get known by these companies. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Amazing.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. That's a great question. Tracy, you're next.
Katie, this was so fantastic.
Oh,
And
thank you.
it reminds me why I'm an entrepreneur.
Yep.
Also, what happens to this recording before I start asking questions? No, my husband works for a very toxic company who now the CTO he's weaponizing mindset, which is, he says all their problems are mindset. Anyway,
Cool.
So what are these people saying? Like, is it the employees that are complaining? Is it like, how would if someone said, oh my gosh, I cannot believe my work situation, or I can't, what are they saying that would make that would be a trigger to think of you?
Right. So that is, I've actually been debating on whether to go after the executive teams first, or to go after the potential lower hanging fruit, which is, there's a lot of outsourcing happening for manager training, not executive training, especially in startups. Startups are not typically investing in executive coaching. They typically can't afford to. You're also only investing in one startup company at the same time. Yeah, and Susan mentioned here in the chat about going after like venture capital firms. So that's actually one of my thoughts there too, is that if I have a solid relationship with a venture capital firm, they're going to be like, yo, you need Katie because y'all are having a problem. So that's one area You know, another could be, I've been looking at companies who've recently acquired a company or have just had a recent leadership change, because it tends to be when they've had one of those significant leadership changes to their executive team where it's in everybody's face that, hey, we're not really a team as an executive team. So that's been a little bit of what I've been looking at. But I'm trying to get more in the head of the executives as well. Most of the executives I've talked to so far have said that they are really focused on growth. And so I've been trying to present my work from that perspective of how people drive business outcomes, and that if you want to accelerate performance, you have to invest in your team and address your team issues in order to make improvements. So that's been kind of a couple ways I'm trying to tackle that.
Cool. That's an interesting side step there. Which way do you go? You know, and you could go both, but I think that would stretch you too thin. So that's a good thought. I don't know how I'd go on that. Theoretically, I am the next person to ask a question because I came from a university setting and we had a very good department, and there was a single person who was very toxic to the rest. And at one point I had an incident with that person where they mentioned to me that I was being toxic to them. And the honest to goodness truth was they were right. Their toxic behavior towards everyone made me act to them in a certain way that wasn't good. And I'm wondering, is that something that's talked about in your product? Is there in your training, and how does that get helped? And how do you deal with something like that? How do you bring that to the forefront?
Yeah. So what, in general, confrontation doesn't really get us many places, right? And we're all really bad at giving feedback and not taking feedback personally. So having that direct contact, I find, is we're just continuing to fall down. And so that's why I like using theater, because if we can create an environment where everyone's responding to the same prompt, like, things like, if you were to describe your, or create an image that describes your relationship with X person or with your leader in an image, then that can be a way that people can start to see, hey, other people are experiencing this too. So what's my contribution to that? But because my programs are focused on the self, we have to look first here before we can look outside. I do also, as part of my group program, have some one-on-ones. So within those one-on-ones, I can get some inside scoop and help do some one-on-one coaching, of people and help to give them that prompting without necessarily having to call them out in front of the group.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, Kareem, you're next.
Hi, everybody. So, Katie, I loved your presentation, and I can see your passion, and I can imagine your skill in terms of leading productive workshops for people. That piece really came through in your presentation. Thank you for sharing it.
Great, thank you.
My comments are I guess twofold. One is that consider putting in your presentation financial impact information, right?
Okay.
So the customers that I have worked with have seen 2x increase in self-report measures and in revenue growth over 6 months after they have worked with me on these things, right? And
Got it. Yep.
And so that I'm we're all trying to make money, and if
totally.
If you're a magical, you know what I mean, like sort of a magic wand, I would hire you tomorrow, you know what I mean? And so so that would just be really impactful.
So until I have actual data like that,
testimonials.
Okay, so even just the qualitative information would be better.
And not only from the participants saying, yo, Katie is fantastic, right? Blah, 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 blah. But also from the managers, I really can see an improvement in our communication. I really see a reduction in our churn. I really see people are more able to work, I don't know, longer hours, right? These, you know, are the amount of time that I've spent in conflict mitigation has reduced 40%, 60%, 90%. People's self-reports of their enjoyment at work have increased 25%. And so we think that, right? Those kind of things, and convert this really fantastic theater concept and role-playing concept into, you know, business outcomes. Would and then the other piece is that also, this is a little bit, so the first idea was kind of pretty close to home, and the second idea is almost like, if the first idea is sort of like plain vanilla ice cream, this one's a little bit like vanilla with a fudge swirl, right? And so this idea is around including any available neuroscience in terms of your pitch, in terms of the credibility of your pitch. For instance, there's this concept called experiential blindness, which may be really relevant for you, which is people can't be what they can't see. And role playing, as you're role playing as a better manager, you're beginning to see experientially what that could look like on a daily basis. And so, like neuroscience in terms of perception, in terms of seeing opportunities, and like that might be really kind of persuasive as well.
Great.
And really, you know, because it's fantastic. Like I believe the story. I echo somebody else that had made mention around, they love the pictures, right? And you can see it, you can kind of visually taste it. And now it's like, as you know, being able to say, okay, these are the outcomes I'm going to have. This is the science. This is the business. This is like the hard stuff. Boom, let's go. Let's sign her up now. We need her now.
Great. Thank you.
Just, I hope I hope I didn't step on anybody's toes or anything. And you know, so if I did, I'm sorry.
Oh, that was great stuff. Thank you so much. Sheila, you are next.
Hi, congratulations, Katie. I remember that July we were in our WeWork, I think it was, with Seed, what was it? Seed Spot?
Seed Spot.
Yeah. I was curious, so great job. And you started with a lot of statistics, which are great. And since you have so many firms you've worked with, you must have some stories that go with those. So it could be interesting to come up with some stories where, you know, you had either your approach made a change in that organization, even though you were an employee or whatever status you were, that wasn't McLaughlin Method yet.
Sure.
And also just to kind of hook in with like, this is how those statistics look. You know, so-and-so was, I mean, is anyone not a survivor of a toxic workplace? I would like to meet them. Anyone here? Adrian, you've never had a toxic workplace?
Yeah, so I've never had an actual workplace. I did a PhD for 7 years and I was the sole leader of my project, so.
Okay, so anyone who's ever had a workplace who hasn't been in a toxic workplace, raise your hand, because it's like a recipe for disaster to work toward a goal. So I just feel like any story you came up with, people will be like, yeah, that happened to me.
Totally. Yeah, thank you. That's a good point.
Okay, well, Katie, you're next. Kate Walsh is next.
No worries. Thank you so much, Katie. So wonderful. I really enjoyed your PowerPoint. The question I was thinking about was modeling, and our host mentioned it a little bit before. But I wonder if in the past or even currently with the work that you're doing, the product that you're seeing, if there's an encouragement for managers or executives to know that, you know, their actions are being modeled And I'm thinking about to my own personal experience in a toxic workplace where I kept thinking I was doing such a great job at being so different than what was coming down from our executive branch. And by the time I took a step back to really evaluate, I thought, oh my gosh, I've absorbed some of this toxic culture and it's coming out in how I'm managing people.
Totally. I've done, I don't operate off of a script. But generally I do use the word model because that's exactly why I'm going after the executives. Like I know that they're like, I was at a company and hired a company to come in and do manager training because I was overstretched. I didn't have any more bandwidth to do that. And, I was there and I was like, oh man, this is good. It was all neuroscience, Kareem. It was really good stuff, but there was no practical application. And so I know people are willing to pay for that. And so I was like, okay, let's start there. But then I was like, but I'm going to do all this great work with this level of leaders and it's just going to get eroded from the top because, so I am torn around whether to focus on that management layer first or to focus on the executive layer. And so, maybe this is a question in general, but if I were to have both programs, it would be the same. I would do the same program, honestly, with both leaders. If I were to have both, how would that come across to my prospective customers, I guess? So that's a general question.
Fantastic. Hey, Tessa, you've got a question?
Yeah, well, funny, Katie, that you should ask that question because I was going to speak somewhat to that.
Excellent.
Love finally hearing, you and I talk a lot about people's lived experiences and day-to-day experiences. And I think, and so like I'm interested because I look at the individual on the very, very, like from them up, and you're like, okay, I'm going to like the top of a workplace and these managers who are like creating, have a mission driven, blah, 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 and top down. So I was thinking as you were talking and doing your presentation, and I'm also like a little bit like at the end of B school with Marie Forleo. So I'm like, there's a lot of like marketing mushing around my head, like, so like, who's your ICA, who are you targeting, and like what their language. So I think like, because you just said like you'd be doing the same program with whichever level it was. It's just about talking to them in their language. And I was thinking, and then Tracy's comment about her husband and being like, well, how would he, being a person who's experiencing this toxic environment, be able to like push that, be like, oh, and so maybe these are like 3 different ICAs that are worth exploring, like going, if it's the CEO, we're probably looking more at like what Kareem was talking about, and then like the speak and growth, make it simple, like here's what I do, here's how it's going to make your workplace better and your life easier. And like do that like direct one-to-one, and then like create the words around that if it's a managerial level, because I would argue, like I think Sheila was commenting, or at that managerial level, like you're motivated because you want your team to work, because you don't want to get the toxic yelling from your manager above you. So maybe you're more incentivized to like reach out, try and find these solutions, and then say, hey, manager person, like feel like this might be a good thing, it could help me with my team, and I really would appreciate it. And then that might be like the entry point that pushes you up to the CEO level. Is maybe another way to roll with it. And then obviously there's the individual who's looking around and pointing and going, hey, I don't like this toxic relationship. And obviously that's a lot harder and maybe not where you want to go. Before I forget, I just had one. Oh, and then I was like, there's that. And then maybe I was also thinking as you were talking, like, is there a way you could, like, if you do work in an industry, which doesn't seem to be the case for you as much, but like in like a kind of, if you could like paint over what is applicable for every industry and every, person at this C-suite level, but like paint it with, your furniture company, blah, 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 or like make it seems super relevant. It would like be like, hey, that's me. Not only am I a CEO or a C-suite person, not only am I not only do we have I have a problem with culture or really care about it, but I'm also in that industry, and this person speaking like knows my problems and can base their training around my, you know what I'm trying to say? Anyway,
yes,
there were some thoughts that came up around that, because I think that you've mentioned that you're like, how do I get to these people? And I feel like those, you know, there's a couple of endpoints, and it's like, well, what feels good to market and what works for you? Like what gets you stoked?
Yep.
I think obviously the C-suite, but like,
yeah, totally. Yeah, there's a little bit of everything. I think in the future, and maybe not too distant future, I essentially have 3 offerings: the executive kind of transformation, the manager training, and then also what I am casually calling like team health reboot, where you work as a team and like work through very specific issues on your team. So it's moving beyond team building and actually getting to like team health and like honest relationships. So
actually that made me think that other thing I was going to say, which was like, you're like, oh, CEO, I'm envisioning it like that. And with the team package, it seems to me like you could create like a ladder or package system, like the add-ons concept, except be like, hey, you CEO, we start here, but what we do with you, we will directly connect into your manager work.
Exactly.
And so it's like a jigsaw piece. Oh, get it with the hands. Anyway, images are good too. Statistics are fun, but I'm way more images person. So maybe pictures around that. But yeah,
totally.
Love it.
Thanks.
Hey, Brian's got another question for you.
Sure. I got a couple comments and then maybe a suggestion. So one comment is the slide deck imagery makes me think, how are you doing this during COVID when you can't be in a room full of smiling people? So thinking about, does your imaging match the current market?
That's a good point.
Other thing is the way the slide deck and some of your language suggest workshop other than a program, where there's things outside of the workshop. And this comes to my suggestion. I'm a coach, and one of the things that makes a coach effective is helping people actually take action.
Yep.
Role play isn't action. Role play is kind of pretending. So you might role play, and then you could probably charge more if you have a coaching element or a program element, to where you say, now that you've role played this, because people are still going to be scared to do it. So what are the small baby steps that they could start to practice some of what they role played and get feedback or accountability with you on how's that going? And then what's the next step? I don't know if that's, but that could, especially for the people like role play, you know, you're going beyond role play and you're actually getting how to practice. So you
exactly.
Get good at it.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, that's part of my program. Thank you for the tip about like workshop rather than program. I essentially have, the program is made up of workshops, right? And so like each time it's a working session. I don't want it to be ever considered a training, because right now in our society, we still consider a training to be presentation, where you just transfer knowledge, not actually learn skills. But that's good feedback. I'll kind of listen back to my language there.
Yeah. And like I said, also think about, is there coaching or support between the workshops?
Yes.
Because that's value added and you can charge more if that's
exactly
clear.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point.
Very cool.
There is,
cool.
It's just not necessarily clear, I guess.
I have one quick question for you, Katie, and that is, I know that in the last maybe 6 weeks, maybe 2 months, you've started blogging as a way to get your message out there. Could you just tell me, how's that going? Do you find that to be good for you and bringing in stuff, or is it just something that's good for you? What's that about? Give me like a 1-minute rundown.
So in some ways, it's really good for me to be honing my message in a longer format than just like posts. right? Like on social media. I'm only on LinkedIn. I'm really hyper focusing my marketing or my social at least. And I have found that by having the blog, like now I've got like a landing page for subscribing to the blog and things like that. And so I am getting a little bit of a boost in subscribers, but I think it's going to be a little slow. And I'm grateful that I'm in a place where I can tolerate, slow accumulation of leads, but it hasn't been like explosive or anything.
Very cool. Yeah, I felt that same way about my blogging experience. So just it's good to hear that I've read that it takes that time. So, but thank you so much for updating us on everything that's happened with you and your company. Everyone, we should thank Katie one more time, but we're not done because there's a question I need to ask you, and I need to go back to screen share. I need to share my screen. Right there it is. And can you guys all see it?
Yep.
All right, fantastic. All right, so the question is, what can the 1 Million Cups community do for you, Katie?
So I need support in thinking about how do I go from these cold leads and turn them and warm them up. I'm doing marketing and things like that, but I need a path to get them warmer so I can actually talk with them. So if anybody has suggestions or ideas, I'd love to connect.
Yeah, so remember this 1 Million Cups last question is really an idea of the last thing that Katie wants to share with us so that we will become her community. So feel free to reach out to her if you've got any thoughts on this. And I think it's a great question she just asked. So let's help her out, let's support her. But there's also the question, all of you that are here today, what can you do for this 1MC community? We're not ever asking for anything from you other than maybe bringing a friend. We'd love to see more people here. So maybe reach out next week, bring a friend, and make this a better community, a more thriving community. We'd love to have 20 to 25 people on here. We're so thankful you're here, but bring a friend. If you enjoy it, I'm sure they will too. And next week, there's going to be another entrepreneur. So you're going to get to hear another great story, a 6-minute talk, and another 20 minutes of excellent conversation. So with that being said, I think it's time that maybe we go into some breakout rooms. And I don't really have any questions of the day for you, but there's lots going on in the world to discuss. And Katie brought up some great ideas. So take a few minutes and stay on and chat with each other.